Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mario here once again, and I'm back for some more of the Maxi Toys videos of course, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of NES remakes for the Nintendo Wii U eShop download, to be more specifically the first game of the forms of NES remakes, or in this case for this matter, the Rainbow Stars run-through. So, yeah, last time we actually did tackle through, well, to be more specifically, some of these challenges that we've already accomplished with the forms of several other Rainbow Stars runs in the forms of any other kinds of objectives, like we've already accomplished Mario Brothers, Golf, Cuckoo Land, and Excite Bike, and Balloon Fight, and Super Mario Brothers. I'm presuming that's what that is. So, yeah, today for this episode, folks, and also we actually I'm pursuing two only challenges in the forms of The Legend of Zelda at this point when it comes to the Rainbow Star runs. So, speaking of which, we're actually going back into The Legend of Zelda for quite some time, because that way we can able to actually get the rest of the majority of the Rainbow Stars run-through. So even then though, if we manage to accomplish with the rest of them, then we would able to actually get ourselves not only additional points and all that stuff, but also by the forms of how the fact that we've almost nearly towards the end of this particular Let's Play before we jump into, you know, NES Remakes 2 at some point during the likes of summertime. So, that should be exciting for me though, for the most part though, especially noticeable how the fact that Sonic is actually going to be, you know, doing NES Remakes 2 eventually, so you know. So you know how the fact that in yesterday's video I've actually invited Princess Peach over for actually just to have a chat by the forms of you know, specific stuff in mind. So this time around though, we're actually going to be inviting the second princess, but this time we have ourselves Daisy. How's it going there, Mario? Yup, it's been a long while since we actually have a chat to each other, at least as far as I've noticed something. You always have a chat with Luigi these days, because, you know, you always have to be Luigi's favorite girlfriend or princess of all time for him, for Luigi, because I still have Princess Peach after all, but even then, no, that's as far as I can really stay for this much until at that point. So, I heard that you're actually going to be hopefully trying to finish up with the forms of NES remakes for the likes of, not during today, because you're about to be hopefully finishing this Let's Play until tomorrow, because, well, you know, today was 29th of April, don't know, think about it. Yeah, it is, Daisy, because even then, no, that's as far as I can make the consumption with the release dates in mind. So, at the moment though, Daisy, is the fact that I'm actually going to be concentrating on The Legend of Zelda for quite a few bits, because even then, speaking of which, it's been a long while since I actually saw The Legend of Zelda since, well, I would say that definitely did manage to tackle for that game as the official playthrough on this game, which even I know something's worth mentioning. So, anyways though. Now, since this was still post-commentaries, even then I can actually talk through every single parts of it though, just like how it does in the forms of you know, yesterday's video. I suggest you use the bomb right there for these dark nuts, but if you want to able to actually complete this task, by the way, to actually make your way to the boss's lair. But even then, though, still the dark nuts is easily the most annoying enemies, alongside with the Wizros in the forms of The Legend of Zelda, the original game, because they never stop flipping moving most of the time, especially noticeable these blue versions of those guys as well. Oh yeah, I've heard about those guys before, because even then though that, you know, definitely did manage to tackle for that game about a couple of months ago, naturally. So, now I'm moving on to the final stage to hopefully get ourselves the Rainbow Stars in the forms of The Legend of Zelda, and that's the forms of stage number 17, which is, you know, all the way towards the end of the game, basically, like dungeons 7 and 9, defeat Ganon, and that's all we're able to do for this task, right there. Yeah, at least as far as I can usually get ourselves a little bit more consumption with this, so, you know, you get the idea with this little suggestions notice. So, there's quite a few things worth mentioning, though. It's the fact that, well, I noticed there's a crappy film out there by the forms of the sequel to Romeo and Juliet, which is basically a golden-known versions of the forms of Romeo and Juliet, which still is a classic tale, don't get me wrong. Well, at least to be more specifically, by the forms of Romeo and Juliet, except Romeo and Juliet, because it's nothing like it to me, though. And, I've heard there's a sequel to this by the forms of Sherlock Gnomes, but it's really lackluster by the looks of all that, because, well, well, obviously it does retains still a lot of pop culture references, which even I know it does that a lot, even for the likes of the second rendition of the forms of, oh, I keep on getting hit by these little disco skulls there, which that's definitely the most trickiest part about this challenge, by the way, because not only do you have to fight against with those wrist rolls right there, but also you're gonna have to work with by the forms of these little annoying disco skulls, because they always attempt to get in your way, and even especially noticeable, they actually really disable your attacks by the forms of sword attacks and all that stuff, which even though that can get really irritating for me though. Oh yeah, because I always managed to able to solve these things before, well, at least ever since then. Okay, so now we move on to the final phase, even though you probably couldn't tell for this point already, because, you know, it's still post-commentary, but even I know, yeah. And, oh yeah, because of how the fact that, as you see on this footage, that how the fact that, Ganon's patterns is actually quite shuffleware, and even then, as long as you're able to actually hit him at the right point, then, obviously, you're pretty much completed through, The Legend of Zelda after all, so... Yeah, naturally speaking as such though, how much stars, or in this case, how many stages you're actually going to at this point, by the forms of not just the actual 100% run through, but also by the forms of obtaining 3 stars department. Well, it might be kind of a loss though, Daisy, I have to admit though, because there were a few times that, as far as I'm aware, because of how the fact that there's going to be still a hell lot more to it from that. Even especially noticeable that recently at this point, that I've pretty much done with The Legend of Zelda at this point, so now we move on to Wrecking Crew. Now, if you guys can clearly do not tell already, it's the fact that, I wish I was gonna do this as an order way, fashion way, to go through, like, you know, Mario Brothers all the way up to The Legend of Zelda, but I'm actually gonna be doing this as a shuffleware, because even then, no, I decided to actually go ahead and say now, I'll save Ice Climber for last, because before you actually get into the forms of the remakes selection of stages, excluding the bonus stages when we get to the finale part of the actual main playthrough of NES remakes, which trust me, that might as well will be, and then basically because even then I might as well discuss upon at this point for the forms of you know, Ice Climber game as far as I'm aware for that, so because, you know, it can really ticks me off on that particular game for that as far as my my own perspective there, but anyway, so now let's move on to stage number 3 is to find, you know, basic simple letters by the forms of when it says Mario, because, you know, Mario was a plumber name, well, at least specifically the most popular plumber these days, but even that's as far as I can really tell for that point. So, yeah, there's not much else to really say about this this video, unfortunately, because there's not much new information that's been had and all that things to be said, though. Besides, I've already mentioned about the forms of Sonic Mania Plus will be on its way on the forms of not only the downloadable update, but the forms of that though on DLC department, which by the way, I'm pretty sure in order to actually buy the DLC from digitally, is by the fact that you need to cost the money, which even I know that might be sounds a little bit more conductive than that. I'm gonna have to admit though right away, but even though it does like how it does in the forms of well, if you ever purchase New Super Mario Bros. U, and whenever when Nintendo announced New Super Luigi U by the forms of the DLC expansion to the forms of New Super Mario Bros. U, except you play as Luigi for the entire time, and basically that's how you can able to actually pay money to that you can able to actually buy some DLC stuff onto your store credit, or even especially noticeable if you're actually trying to add some funds from any other purpose notice. So that's the only things I must well mention about this until now. So still looking forward to it. Yeah, because I'm really glad how the fact that Sonic Mania Plus now actually finally retains the 4-player DLC for competition mode, which even then was about time. Well, at least to be more specifically though, Daisy, because of how the fact that, I haven't really touched upon competition mode, I'm gonna be honest with you, because even then, I was really excited to actually play through that, but it's just how the fact that none of my friends did actually play with me all that much, which even then, I kinda wish that we can able to actually get into competition mode these days. Well, at least every now and then, most of the people are always playing through, Fortnite, which they still about to be playing through that. And especially noticeable in, well, Team Fortress 2, as far as the actual old retro stuff is concerned, Yeah, that's what I was trying to think about that, Daisy. That's the thing I was always trying to able to actually say about that. Anyway, so now let's move on to the final stage in the forms of Wrecking Crew before we move on to Ice Climber, because even then, I will say this right now, that I'm actually going to be discussing upon how the fact that with the forms of the top 10, you know, the top rankings between these every single challenges, best to worst, or in this case, worst to best, particular challenges when it comes to NES game selection, I might as well discuss it right about now. The worst one of the bunch for me, though, it was definitely a tie between Cuckoo Land and especially noticeable with Ice Climber, because for Ice Climber, by the forms of that specific attempts on the Rainbow Stars department, holy cow, did that take forever to actually get them all done, because even then, if you, again, the way how that game plays out to be, because of how the fact that the actual premise of that particular game itself always illiterates you by the forms of how the fact that you have to be so specific with all these jumps you have to able to actually cooperate to able to do that stuff, because again, sometimes you're able to actually not to register your jumps, or even other times, you're actually gonna get clipped through that particular platform, which always really irritates the crap out of me, because even I know that could really happen to me for quite a few episodes on that specific situations like that, which sure, it's incredibly annoying though. If you might as well able to think about it though, Daisy, good luck for playing that particular Ice Climber game, because no matter what though, you are seriously gonna get wrecked by the forms of not only physics and controls, and even especially noticeable with these little collision detection by the forms of clipping through ground and all that stuff, which is always aggravating me, honestly. But that's just how it is when the forms of this game in particular does actually functions worked for, which even then, well, I would say though is that the entire game itself looks pretty cool at first, but it's just how the fact that how ridiculous to how to able to actually, you know, but just bypass through everything. Like as you can see there in the stage number 4, I'm having a hard time with this particular level, because again, too many enemies keep on getting your way sometimes, and especially noticeable with the forms of controls, and even especially don't get me started on the forms of the collision detection issues, which even then, oh my god, that just really took me a long ass time. Sorry for a little bit of a language there for that point, but even then, it just feels like a little bit of endurance test, but in forms of just trying to able to go through every single thing about Ice Climber was essentially trying to throw at you. Well, sure looks awesome back in the day, during the likes of in 1984, but at this point, this was in the forms of, you know, 2018. It's become very, very archaic, just like how it does in the forms of any other first games out there, which even now might be sounds a little bit more conductive, or in this case just a little bit too brutal on aside from things. Well, that's how I can able to describe from, because even I know, yeah. So yeah, yeah, you can definitely guarantee how the fact that there are plenty of times in this particular game itself you might get screwed over at some specific sections later, especially noticeable that if you want to able to desperately try to go after every single Rainbow Stars you have to go through for that point, well, good luck with that one, because even I know you might as well get screwed over a lot, even for, you know, some specific stuff like that. So anyway, aside from not much anything else to be said from this point, I should probably point things out for that point is the fact that we've only got about I would say about 3 weeks left until Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch will be about to be its release in the forms of that particular day. Well, to be more specifically, the English version, because normally in the forms of the Japanese version already got that in the forms of sometime in March. Why is it always Japan got that particular game first instead of our country? Although, I guess that makes it a little bit obvious because of how the fact that that game was usually is based off from Dynasty Warriors, but with the Legend of Zelda universe after all. But even though that's as far as I can really tell for that point of view, which still. Okay, so yeah, again, there's not much else to say about this point, folks, because, you know, seriously, somehow managed to, get some mistakes there, which, I do apologize about the fact that you might hear me, sniffing or snorting for quite a lot. It's only because of how the fact that, again, my throat is usually kind of dries up a little bit, because of how the fact that I keep on talking way too many things, but it involves of not only just for these, new announcements and all that stuff, but also pretty much everything for the sake of comedy, or in this case, to be more specifically, commentary, which, yeah, that's all I can say about it. Oh god, stage 7. This is a stage I'm always having trouble with, but in forms of, not only for the forms of, the actual, attempts on my own time, but at the same time recording attempts, because even then, because again, controls-wise, is super stiff, and especially noticeable that, you know, collision detection comes into play, and that's why things can get really, really screwy here. Especially, don't get me started by the forms of trying to able to, God forbid, trying to get onto that damn Gondor, because no matter what though, how many times I was hopefully trying to able to actually touch, or trying to grab onto the Gondor, but at the same time, nothing else happens, because even then, I was hoping to able to reach for that certain point, but next thing you know is, though, Mario, that you just screwed over, basically. Yes, exactly, Daisy, exactly, because that just really ticks me off most of the time, because even then, I was hoping I can able to actually successful that challenge. That bear just got away, so even then, he's probably thinking like, nope, I'm not going out, I'm going back in. So even I know that you can't get arrested out of me. Anyway, so there we go. That way, just smash that polar bear, and we can able to actually just deal with. I'm assuming the last stage we're gonna be doing buddy forms of the Rainbow Stars run through, because even I know that there was only 2 Rainbow Stars I've actually got into buddy forms of the Ice Climber game itself, which are stage number 2, and especially noticeable with stage number 9. Because I'm actually able to done these no problem, despite with the forms of the, you know, the physics and controls can get pretty strict, as far as I'm most well concerned about this. And there you go, folks, that is Ice Climber. The awfulness is now pretty much, well, I won't say it's too awful or anything, it's just how the fact that how little, that game heavily utilized trial and error moments, which even then though, if you don't know what you're doing, it is the most frustrating level, I have to admit though, right away from the start though. So, now we're moving on to the coolest parts about this game, at least to me though anyway, and that's the forms of the remake stages, because even though we've already gone through all 12 of the main NES games at this point, like, well obviously those Donkey Kong Jr., so that was about 2 of them, and also Mario Bros. Stands for 3, and golf, pinball, and let's see, Donkey Kong Jr., Mario Bros, golf, pinball, and sorry, I can't speak today. Actually, I can't speak today for this point, folks, because I'm currently running out of ideas, but in forms of, just for the sake of commentary-wise, because even then, again, it's not much anything else to be said for this throughout. Oh, this is a really famous, part, I just want to say that much. Darn, we're not gonna make it, let's speed up. But in forms of the Run Mario segments, including, Run Luigi segments, once we're able to when we get into, Remakes 2 stages, because even then, though, what makes you say that, Mario? I'm gonna have to be honest with you. That's only because of how the fact that it always reminds me of those Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 Mark Speed sections after all, because even then, because of that, I always keep on referencing that particular dialogue every time when I run into like run character missions type of syndrome like that. I always call that out loud, because even I know that. Again, it just reminds me of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 Mark Speed sections, as far as I'm aware. Now, as far as for the Rainbow Stars run through of the forms of the Remakes 1 category, unfortunately I didn't get that much Rainbow Stars on that particular catalog. Well, it wasn't until when we get to Remakes 2, and especially noticeable with bonus stages or the bonus section, things can get a little bit more easier said than done, but at the same time, it can be a little bit strict for the specific games, most notably Ice Climber and Cuckoo Land, because both of those games can get really ridiculously challenging sometimes when it comes to mission objectives wise, because even then, yeah, that's all I can cover it for anyway. I get the point there, Mario. I can get that point for that. Alright, so stage number 7, all I have to do is basically we have to kick the likes out of these little shell creepers as fast as you can. And as you can see on this footage, I made this section really easy, or in this case, this level really easy, especially noticeable with these rainbow stars I've managed to gather through. So, anyways, let's get back into this, buddy, in forms of, how much games did he actually, the NES remakes did actually got? I totally forgot. Well, there's Donkey Kong Jr., Mario Bros, Pinball, Golf, and which actually leads up to 5, Cuckoo Land, Excite Bike, Balloon Fight, and Super Mario Brothers, and The Legend of Zelda. So, I think I was wrong about the actual miscalculation by the forms of that particular stuff, so that would be about 10 games on that first half's catalyze, which even then, I must admit that I must apologize for that point, because even then, I wasn't paying too much attention with the visual cue or something like that. But, anyway though, so now let's move on to stage number 10, which we're actually going back to Super Mario Brothers, but this time with ice physics in the forms of, you know, World 1-4, or in this case, World 4-1, sorry. And, what I found is a little bit tricky to get the Rainbow Star on this particular stage, I have to admit though, is the fact that these particular stairs, doesn't carry too much momentum. I'm gonna have to realize about that stuff, because even I know, if I manage to go into the complete stop by the forms of that particular, staircases like this, sometimes it just loses my momentum if I manage to run too fast and all that stuff. So that's the only tricky part to get the Rainbow Stars on that particular run through, but at least it's something else. Now we move on to stage number 12, which basically we need to protect Luigi from it. So in this case, Luigi player number 2 of all things. In fact, you know how the fact that Luigi was now 35 years old at this rate, because of how the fact that this was now 2018. Well, we won't exactly get into 35th anniversary of Luigi just yet until I could assume in July or something like that, because even I know that normally back in 2013, how the fact they actually released both of those games that usually focuses on the forms of Luigi stuff, which are, well, obviously is one obvious, is the forms of Luigi's Mansion 2, aka Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, which it already came out in the forms of about 5 years ago right now, because, you know, that game did originally came out in March 2013. And also there's New Super Luigi U, which is the proper 30th anniversary Luigi game by the forms of the actual Wii U game, and especially noticeable by the forms of Luigi's main focus in the forms of, you know, at least when it comes to the story details and all that stuff, in the forms of Mario and Luigi Dream Team and all that stuff, and even then, no, that's as far as I can really tell for that point. And as you can probably guys can clearly tell, I accidentally managed to able to restart this particular objective, because assuming I actually realized I've got myself a Rainbow Star, but I somehow accidentally fall off the level when I was still Invincible Mario, which even then I still managed to get the Rainbow Star just in time by the forms of that lucky attempts. So, yeah, that's as far as I can really say about this here though. And also, aside from all those Luigi's games as I previously mentioned, there's also Dr. Luigi, which I can appreciate of how I can still manage to download that game on the Wii U, but I need to actually just hurry up about it though, because eventually at this point in the future, I can assume that Nintendo eShop, when it comes to the Wii U, it'll pretty much gonna have to shut the servicing shut down eventually until in the entire future, which even then I'm probably not gonna let that happen though, but even I know I'm just a little bit too nitpicky at this point, because I still really missed the Wii Shop channel for this point onwards, because even I know that has to be one of my favorites Nintendo Wii titles of all time, because even now you can actually download retro games here and there, and especially noticeable with the WiiWare titles after all, like, you know, you got Dr. Mario Gem Buster, and especially noticeable by the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1, which is the only episode they only released on the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 episodic releases in the forms of the Nintendo Wii console, which I found is a little bit more limited as far as the actual premise things goes. Oh, this is a part right there. Elise's trainers. Uh-oh, gotta speed up. Or in this case, Princess Peach's... sorry, I can't speak today for that point, folks. I do apologize for that. But, Princess Peach's is actually in... Uh-oh, gotta speed up. Seriously, you always say that, Mario. But I can't help it for myself, though, Daisy, because even then, it just always reminds me of those particular parts noticing like that, so... There we go, I've managed to able to done a successful attempt on that particular Rainbow Star run on the forms of stage number 18, so we're almost nearly towards the end of Remakes 1. So hopefully after Remakes 1, then we're pretty much going to be moving on to Remakes 2, which even then I'm probably not going to do all the entire missions in during the likes of Remakes 2 stages, but definitely in the next and the final video of the forms of NES Remakes. I can guarantee you by that. So anyways, now we move on to Excite Bike, which basically in this challenge is the fact that you automatically use the turbo technique right there, but obviously we need to actually keep an eye out by the forms of these little dash panels before we're able to actually get ourselves our turbo fuel back, which even though that's the only ultimate premise of this challenge's goal is contained. So anyway though. How long does that particular processing by the forms of the Rainbow Stars run you can have to go through, Mario, right there? How long does it take? Probably for a long time though, Daisy, because even though it did take me a lot of tries just to able to get these challenges right and going, because if I managed to make one simple mistake, but in forms of, for instance, if I messed up on that mud section in the forms of this challenge right there, I'm probably not going to get the Rainbow Star, but as long as I'm able to actually avoid everything, then I'm pretty much guaranteed to actually obtain those. So now we move on to Balloon Fight, in this case stage number 20, in the forms of Remakes 1 set of stages, and I'm actually able to get this in a the exact right moment, especially noticeable with how the fact that, well, it's kind of annoying to how the fact that these little particular obstacles will actually becomes like a regular bumper of any sorts, but usually as far as I can basically consumption with that though. So anyways, now let's move on to stage number 21. This will have to be one of my least favorite Mario Bros. Challenges, I have to admit though right away though, because at least if you know what you're doing, this particular challenge wasn't that hard to begin with though. Although to be fair, the only hardest part the hardest part about this challenge though for me is how the fact that you need to guess which one is the real one or is this a fake. So like let's say for example, there's one on the right, and yeah, sometimes they always goes in an odd patency going on here. But luckily though, I've managed to able to actually got that as a successful attempt. Sorry for a little bit of a tongue twisting at the end, folks, because even though there's not much else to be said when it comes to news related stuff. Besides, well, it's not long until still but in forms of Nintendo's E3 2018 at this rate, which still is really exciting to me though to see what these new announcements aside from Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo Switch. And I've heard there are some plenty of rumors out there they're trying to be making a brand new Pokemon game for the Nintendo Switch. Oh, speaking of such though, is the fact that I have to be brutally honest here for that point, Cap King 74, is the fact that, well, there's actually a Game Boy Advance game that we still managed to get even to this day, but in forms of Pokemon Sapphire, and much like how it does in Pokemon Ultra Moon, which I did manage to sell that particular item about a couple of days ago, because let me tell you for this point, folks, I wasn't really a huge Pokemon fanatic, to be more specifically the main serious mainstream Pokemon titles, because it doesn't feel my attention to it, to be honest, because even then, that, although it's kind of cool at first, but it forms up back in the day by the likes of the original Game Boys lineup, but it's just how the fact that it's not my cup of tea or anything, which even then, that I know some people do have their own opinions, mine itself included, but it's just how it's one of those things that, if you try these games out for yourself, and you might be thinking this might be have some different experiences from yourself, from your own perspective, then it's entirely up to you if you think that it wasn't your kind of thing, or if especially noticeable as something else. So somehow I pretty much haven't got Pokemon Sapphire anymore, just because of how the fact that, well, to be honest, I wasn't really a huge Pokemon fanatic. Well, I still managed to get myself Pokemon Gold, but in forms of the 3DS download, so that I can play it there, because it's on the 3DS to begin with. But strangely enough though, is the fact that it doesn't have a save state. I think that's the reason why they can't be bothered to actually use the save states in the forms of Pokemon Virtual Console games on the 3DS. I think you get the point there, Mario. It's most likely because if you're trying to able to capture legendary Pokemon and all that stuff, even especially noticeable with the regular Pokemon, or even the different kinds of gender, but in forms of Pokemon types, and even especially noticeable with the shiny versions of Pokemons themselves, you know, because of the fact that you only have to do like a couple of attempts notice, unless if you keep on resetting that particular software is concerned, but in forms of that particular shortcut menu by simply accessing but in forms of the X button. So that way you can able to do it just like that. But it's just one of those things that you can't able to use save states in that particular Pokemon games these days, but in forms of the 3DS, you know, 3DS versions throughout. So, yeah, this particular challenge I'm also having a hard time because you have to jump at the right time to be able to actually activate that power block. Because if you time that at the wrong time, you're guaranteed not to get the Rainbow Stars from that particular run. So anyways, now let's move on to stage 7. Oh boy, we're going back to Ice Climber again. With, you know, these problems I mentioned earlier, but now somehow makes it ridiculous these days, especially noticeable in some challenges like this, but in forms of collecting all the vegetables that again, you easily clip through that platform for your first time players, but it's just one of those things that you're easily gonna get screwed over by the forms of screwy platforming physics in mind. So, but on the plus side notes is the fact that we've almost nearly towards the end of NES remakes basically before we jump into, well, Sonic and able to actually tackle through, you know, NES Remakes 2, which even though, thankfully though, NES Remakes 2, to me though, actually has a better library of games, to be more specifically Super Mario Bros. 3, and especially noticeable with Kirby's Adventure and stuff like that, and all the other stuff for that matter too, which even though that could be very, very, very exciting for these parts. So yeah, this particular challenge, break all the walls, I also have a really hard time on this as well because of how the fact that I seriously cannot guarantee of how many times I'm always gonna get screwed over by not only enemies, but it's also because of how the fact that you keep on, you're gonna have to know which of those walls that you do have to break for a certain amount of times, because even then know that if you're not fast enough, you easily gonna get hit by these enemies. But even then, as long as I'm able to actually just manage to pay attention to that specific section there, then this particular section is not that hard for me though, at least as far as I think it is. So, let's just say that, you know, we pretty much, done things said about the forms of some of these discussions to actually discuss through for this point, Daisy. Yeah, because even I know there's not much else anything new around here, because even I know that, at least until when it gets to, at some point in June and stuff like that. So yeah, this two forms of this particular challenge, we're going back to sorry, I can't speak today, folks. I really do apologize for that point. But we're going back to Excite Bike again, but, you know, everything else is completely flipped. So we have to get used to what the forms of the reversed controls and all that stuff, or even especially noticeable with the opposite controls direction. So, at least the A button still functions as the accelerate button, and the forms of the B button for the turbo button. But that's as far as I can say about this here. So, yeah, with that being said, folks, I'm afraid we have to end things off for this point until about 50 seconds left, because, well, after this particular challenge, I might as well do one more challenge before we end off this video, but in forms of I believe the next challenge is going to be in Mario Bros, but everything else is scrolling. So, I hope you guys are able to actually enjoy the rest of this particular footage, as you can tell right there. Despite the lack of, commentary they actually did discuss upon for that point. But anyway, so join me next time on Let's Play NES Remakes. Is that we're hopefully finishing up with this particular game to finish up with the Rainbow Stars run in the forms of Remakes 2, and eventually bonus at the very end. So thank you, Daisy, for joining me on this particular session. So yeah, I'd like you to go now. Yeah, thanks a lot, Mario. So anyways, though, I'll see you guys sooner or later. Yeah, at least it depends on time. So anyway, see you guys next time. Later, fellas.